I love this passage from the Gospel according to John. As a matter of fact, I believe that chapters 13, 14, and 15 of the Gospel according to John are three of the most important chapters in the entire Bible. I don't say that lightly, and it's also kind of a surprise for me because John is my fourth favorite gospel. And my Bible people, how many gospels are there in the Bible? There are four, right? So the fourth favorite gospel. But this gospel has been calling out to me, shouting out, saying, please, 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 just preach from me for the past months. And I have probably preached more in John over the past 6 months than I have in my entire 9 years of full-time ministry. Now, on June 1st, I'll have been here 6 years, which means I served a church previous to this one, but I hope never to serve another church but this one ever again. Because I love you. I love this congregation. I love this community. And I love each and every one of you. And I apologize for when I forget to say that enough. Whether you're here in the sanctuary, you're here online. Whether you've been here for the entire time that I've been here, or if you just came in here today, or if I've never met you and you are online right now. And that may sound strange. You haven't even sat down with me and spent a lot of time with me, and you love me, and how is that even possible? It is possible, but it takes a long time. It took me a long time to get to that point, following these ways. And it wasn't always like that. See, I love this Bible. Not just that passage. I love this Bible, but it wasn't always that way. See, I used to have this conversation with God. See if you relate to this one at all. Say, God, I'm almost there. Like, I want to be all in. Like, but can you just give me a sign? Can you just give me something? Maybe just like show up. I don't need you there like all the time. Can we just like hang out for an hour? Right? And once you do that, like we hear this all the time. People say, just show me a sign and I'll be in. And it'll be like this. Okay, God, because I know like if you show up in your full presence and I think I kind of explode or something. So how about just Jesus? I don't need like a whole seminar. I don't need to be at a conference with them for 3 days. Can I just have like an hour with Jesus and just talk to Jesus, and then I will jump in? But it doesn't work like that. How many people here remember George Burns? All right. For those of you who don't know who George Burns is, George Burns was a legendary comedian and actor, and he played God in this movie, Oh God, with John Denver as the other lead character. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful movie. But God doesn't just show up in the form of George Burns. And for a more modern example, he doesn't show up as Morgan Freeman either. Although, wouldn't it be great if God's voice was Morgan Freeman's voice? I think that would be so fantastic. It doesn't work like that. But some people think that because God doesn't show up in that form, that we don't have the opportunity to meet God, that we don't have the opportunity to meet the living Jesus, which isn't true. You have the opportunity, you have the ability to meet God. You have the opportunity to meet the living Jesus. And a lot of the instructions are right in this passage. So let's jump right into it and see what we get. Now, folks, please do not disappoint me in front of the church consultant when I ask this question. When we are going through a passage, what is one of the most important things we need to know about the passage to be able to fully understand it? Thank you. Now, I wasn't going to be disappointed because you didn't remember what I said. I was going to be disappointed because the answer was right there. Okay? So wherever we are, understanding where this passage is in the Bible, where it is in the story of the particular gospel, where it is written, matters a great deal. And this passage is happening in a period of time, chapters 13, 14, and 15, where Jesus is having the Passover supper, the last Passover supper, with the disciples, where on that evening he is captured, tortured, held prisoner, and then the next day crucified, and a few days later rises again. These 3 chapters are that few hours that they are together. A lot of time in the Bible, like 3 chapters can convey 1,000 years. 3 chapters for an hour with his disciples before he gets taken. He is trying to land the most important messages that he could possibly land to them in this last time with them. This is when he washes the disciples' feet to show that example. This is when he establishes the ritual of communion, which we are going to share after the sermon. This is where, over here, there's a little gap here at the table because Judas is out of the room going betraying him. And during this period of time, Jesus says, the new commandment, the most important commandment, the commandment that triumphs over all of them, which he actually says in verse 13, which is, love one another as I have loved you. This is how everyone will know that you are actually following me for real, that you show and act in love towards one another and others in the world. In these 3 chapters, he says that, or a variant of that, 10 times. He doesn't say anything 10 times. 10 times in this few hours that he is with them, in these 3 chapters, he says it over and over and over again in different forms. Why? Why? One, because this is the last time he's going to talk to them as a group, and he's trying to land that most important point. Another why. How many times do the disciples get it the first time? Which is what I am so grateful for, because we're supposed to be the disciples, right? In these stories, we're supposed to put ourselves in the place of the disciples. How many people get it right all the time the first time? Right? This is the grace of Jesus. Jesus calls us to follow these things that he says 10 times in a 3-hour period to drive the point home. But when we mess up, says, okay, there is still grace to try again. It's not that we're rejected after we don't. But the other why is he really wants them to know what this is. And here's what I imagine, because you know I believe in imagination as we think about these stories, right? And I imagine Jesus saying, okay, basically saying, here's what I need you to do. Here's what I need you to do. And they're like, all right, great. He's finally not going to tell us a confusing puzzle. Right? He's finally not going to tell us in a parable. He's not going to tell us in a trick. He's not going to try to do this. He's just going to tell us what he wants us to do. And then Jesus does that and says, I need you to obey and do what I did. How many people like the sound of that word? Not too many people, right? We're independent Americans. Right? Freedom is being able to do whatever we want, whenever we want to do it. Obey? What's that? No, life is best when I can do what I want, whenever I want, and get whatever I want. The problem is, look at the world that's resulted in that path of freedom. That is not real freedom. But our reaction is kind of like the toddler or the 5-year-old when you're telling them to do something and they're like, you're not the boss of me. Right? She just named her dog. There you go. Do what I did. And they're like, wait, what? Wait, couldn't you give us a simpler assignment than that? Couldn't you give us something else to do? Why? Why? Because this love in action stuff that Jesus is asking us to do, it's not that emotional love. It's not like go fall in love with everybody. It is actually helping people and doing things, actions in love for people we might not even know, right? Because this stuff is hard. So I have a question for you all. If we're to think about what love in our faith, what love looks like in action, what are some of the things we do that show love to other people? Kindness. Didn't hear. Feed them. Service. Valuing. Listening. Forgiveness. All right, we just hit the bottom. So we could keep, look how fast learning. Okay. All right. Kindness, feeding people, service, valuing, listening, forgiving, learning. Just rattled that right off. We could keep going, but I asked that same question to some other people. And let's see how that compares. Virtually the same list. Right? These are the things, among others, that show what love in action is, which is what we are asked to do. To forgive is giving of yourself. To let go of the anger you think you have the right to have towards somebody else, to let that go. Compassion, valuing and compassion are very similar. Giving of yourself to show empathy for another person's situation. Listening, giving of yourself and letting go of what you're trying to convince in order to really listen to somebody, for understanding them and what's behind what they are saying. Helping is giving of yourself to help somebody else. Kindness is seeing somebody in need and giving of yourself to help that other person. These are all forms of love, forms of giving, which is a form of sacrificial love. When Jesus says there is no greater love than to give your life for a friend or for somebody else, it doesn't mean you physically have to die. It means that you are giving sacrificially to other people, that you are doing it in a non-personally motivated way, and that you are acting in love towards other people, some of whom you may know, some of whom you may have just met, some of whom you may never know. Anybody want to know what the next question is? Ah, there we go. I love you all. Love you all. Why? So that. In the scripture here, one of the things is, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. Note that if. If you don't keep my commandments, you don't abide in Jesus' love because you don't know him. And I have said these things so that my joy may be complete. So you can be my friends if you do these things. Why do these things? So that, Jesus says, so that I know, he's saying this to the disciples, right? He's talking to the disciples, he says, so that I need you to do this, disciples, so that I know you're for real. So that I know you're actually following me, so that you actually are taking me as a faith leader seriously, so that I know you're actually my friend, so that I know you've actually gotten this point and are actually going to live out after I'm gone what's going to be and how you're going to take your 11 cells and multiply this stuff in the world, so that others know that you're for real. Because others are going to know you, as I said, and as he said earlier, others are going to know you through your actions. People are going to know you're associated with me, but how are others going to know what we're really about? This is how people are going to know whether you are my true disciples, how you act in love. And then so that you can experience joy. So that you can experience joy. I have said these things so that my joy may be complete in you and that your joy may be complete. And so you can abide in my love, which means you can be in my love. You can feel it. And this is how you meet Jesus. This is how you meet Jesus, through doing these actions of love and then feeling what that love is. And then all of a sudden you start to become closer and closer and closer to Jesus. And Jesus tells you that when you begin to do this, you get closer and closer and closer to Jesus. And then you start seeing Jesus all over the place. Jesus says, when you know me, you know God, and then you meet God in that process. Because if God is love, and you have figured this out, and you do these actions in love, then you will meet God everywhere. In a way way more impactful than if you got God or Jesus the way I was asking for God earlier in my life. And when we do this, we will be able to show others, and we will be able to experience ourselves. A far different form of life than the world is trying to sell us when we are trying to be all independent and all that, and saying that freedom is actually in being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, to anybody I want, getting as much as I want. When true life actually comes from a different form. 10 times in just a few hours, for I have set you an example that you should also do as I have done. I give you a new commandment that you love one another as I have loved you. You should also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. They who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me. Those who do not, do not. Those who love me will keep my word. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. Said this so that you may have joy, and you may have love, and you may have life abundantly. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. You are my friends if you do what I command you. And I'm giving you these so that your joy will be complete, and so that you love one another. Why are we supposed to follow these instructions? And if you don't like the word commandment, you don't like obey, think of them as directions. Why should we follow these directions? Because these directions will let Jesus know that you are for real and take you more seriously and be able to work more closely with you and leverage everything you do in this world. Why should you do this? So that other people look at your life and say, you are a real follower of Jesus. Because there are a lot of people claiming to be Christians today that are not following Jesus. And it is destroying the brand of Christianity. It may be too far gone, and we may need to brainstorm a different term for it. I just as soon call myself, and just as frequently call myself, a follower of Jesus than I do Christian right now. People need to see you doing this so that they know there are actually people who take Jesus seriously. So that they can experience the choice. They can see your joy and say, what is it that you have? Because people will do that, by the way. If you start doing this, right? I got head shakes coming around. When you start doing it, or you see other people, you know, and people will come up to you and saying, what is it that you have? So that others know. And you want to follow these directions because your joy, drawing closer to Jesus, drawing closer to God, will be so profound. And the love that you feel walking with Jesus, the love you will feel with God's presence so close to you, it will be as palpable as if George Burns or Morgan Freeman were walking right alongside of you. And so that we can show people what real life is. We, as a community of faith, need to do this, because if we do this, we will be able to show what it is like. 11 disciples changed the world, and then the world is trying to change it back. Between folks in this sanctuary and online, we have easily 111 people. Those 11 didn't change the world in their lifetime, but the people they touched, the people they impacted, did. Why should we do this? So that if this community of faith, this 111 people together do this, we can change it back too. Amen.